everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are back for part 5. We're at the halfway point of Run with the Wind, the novel, and I can't put this book down. I've been wanting to record. I have to basically pace myself for the recording because I have plenty of shows on this channel to record for the month, so I can't do like a Run with the Wind recording every day, and I needed to actually take some time off between part 4 and part 5, which we're reading today, to go back and watch some of the anime. Oh no, woe is me. To have the duty and job of watching Run with the Wind's anime. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't watched Run with the Wind's anime in a while. I got the Blu-ray set because it was on sale through Sendai a little while back. And so I have that, and it's been such a great, because you can't really do, like, unfortunately the streaming service that hosts Run with the Wind is not really compatible for like smart TVs and stuff, or at least the one that I have. So I was like, well, thank goodness I have the Blu-ray so I can just pop it in and watch it. And so I've watched through episodes 10 now of the anime, which is about a little under the halfway point of the anime, and we're a little bit under the halfway point of the book. So I stopped with episode 10 because episode 10 of the anime is the episode where Haiji faints, and that's also the anime episode where Haiji's helping out Nico with his diet and everything. Now, there's definitely, I stopped there for a couple reasons. One, because it's around the time that the fainting happens in the novel, but also because it was starting to get into some stuff that we haven't talked about in the book, and so I wanted to stop and wait and see if this part here would talk about it before we moved on. So part 5 is called Summer Clouds, which I'm thinking is maybe the summer training camp, possibly. Maybe we'll find out, but I didn't want to record too far into it. What is so interesting is that the novel, there's a lot of things that the novel just gets right to. Like, we just get right to Haiji's fainting. We get right to everybody making their prelim times that they need to qualify for the prelim. We get through all of that fairly quickly. And instead, what the novel does is it breaks down these little character moments between Haiji and Kakeru. It fleshes out Kakeru. What's interesting is the novel fleshes out Kakeru's kind of angst without getting into his whole thing with his former team and Sakaki. Like, the novel is very subtle, but I really like it, and I like the choices that it makes in terms of pacing. The anime, because it's an anime format and because it's trying to target its audience in a way to keep them engaged visually through an animated show, it makes some decisions in how it organizes things. Like, it decides to have Kakeru is a lot more outwardly aggressive and outwardly irritated with what's going on. Here, he's kind of irritated, but he's also going along with Haiji and trying to work with Haiji, so it's a little bit different. His relationship with Prince, I feel like, is a little bit more played as like a sibling tense rivalry in the anime than it is here. And then obviously Sakaki has a much bigger presence in the anime than he has had so far in this. Fujioka's had a little bit more of a presence than he has in this, although it's about the same. And as of the end of episode 10, we still haven't gotten Prince getting the time we just got him getting the time to be in the prelim. They like lifted up in the air at the end of the episode. Whereas we got to that fairly soon in the novel. So they're still going through the same things. There's a lot more focus in the anime with Nico and him and Kakeru kind of like get together, and Kakeru gives him some advice that Yuki's kind of worried is not healthy, and so he kind of like gets back to Haiji about that. We've not had a lot of Nico focus in the novel yet. There's been a lot more with Musa, there's been some with Prince, and there's been a lot with Kakeru and Haiji. So I feel like we might get that Nico focus, but it may be in this segment rather than they get it a little bit closer to it in the anime. So there's also a lot more with King in the anime early on than there is. Like, King's hardly mentioned in the novel at this point, but King's whole dilemma about his job and everything is mentioned in the anime. And watching episodes 3 through 10, which is what I've been working on this last week, I've been noticing that it's like, do you wonder if the anime is like padding out and expanding on certain things in an anime only context because it doesn't want to immediately get through all the good chunks, and then you're like, what do you do? Or what's the deal? So I'm going to be curious moving forward to see what we get with this, but I want to see how far we get in part 5 here before we dive in before I dive any further into the anime and see what happens there. But it's been a lot of fun going back and rewatching the anime. I've been watching it in the English dub because I watched it for the channel in the Japanese sub. The English dub is actually really good. I really like the voice actors in the English dub. There's some voice actors for the English dub that I have never heard in anything else. And so I'm wondering, like, was this their only gig? They do a good job. They just have a very unconventional voice, and it's not the usual, like, anime voice. So I'm so curious about that. I feel like some dubs have certain, like, character roles that you're like, have you done any other roles? Like, I feel like Kuroko's Basketball has that, where they have a lot of, in their English dub, voices that I'm like, I've never heard anywhere else. And then in Run with the Wind, definitely. And it could just be the company doing the dub that does it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not watching enough of the English dubs to see them in other things. But it's a good dub. If you get a chance to watch it, it is a good dub. I really like Haiji. Haiji's English dub voice actor is not the same, but reminds me of Oikawa's English dub voice actor, just in kind of his cadence and the way that he carries himself. And I love me Haiji, and I love me some Oikawa, so I'm not complaining about either of these decisions. But yeah, I'm super excited. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive into part 5 of Run with the Wind. So thank you for joining me with reading this book series. With this novel. I'm so glad that I have it. Thank you, Zero Anti-Zero, for getting me this. I'm ecstatic. So we're going to start part 5 of Run with the Wind, the novel. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let us begin. Part 5 is called Summer Clouds. I'm assuming this is a summer training camp, but we will find out as we go. How are we supposed to practice in this crazy heat? But if we slack off, we'll be homeless. I like the contrast because they're going to be practicing in such, like, frigid temperatures. So the fact of them worrying about practicing now in the heat seems like it's going to be inconsequential when it actually comes down to it. But maybe it's just getting the body used to practicing in extreme conditions. Kakeru was in the kitchen boiling some somen noodles for lunch when he overheard snatches of conversation from behind him. It was Joda and Joji who were sprawled out in the hallway near the front door. Ever since Kyosei fainted, the Chikusei-so residents had begun to pay extra attention to their physical health. Once a month, they all visited the same neighborhood physician who had examined Kyosei and got tested for anemia. Their kitchen was well stocked with a variety of supplements, and every night before bed, the whole house turned into a veritable massage fest. Still, there was nothing that could be done about the heat. Now that they'd finished their final exams for the first semester and dived into summer break, the temperature exploded to the boiling point. Chikusei-so, of course, wasn't equipped with air conditioning. So all the doors throughout the building were left wide open, even the front door. The residents were crawling around the hallways in search of any spot where they might find even a moment's respite from the heat. Look, y'all, this is the one thing about America that I take for granted so much until I get on Discord and hear the people on the channels from Europe point out. I take advantage of the fact that I have air conditioning. I take it for granted. And then when I hear people from Europe and internationally that are like, yeah, we don't have air conditioning in the summer, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. I was like, oh, I am taking that for granted because air conditioning where I'm at, and it's not even like the worst, hottest parts of the US, I use that sucker. So y'all have my sympathy because I'm like, you don't have air conditioning? You don't have ice? What? How do y'all live? I guess you're used to it, but still. The steaming hot air rising from the big pot clung to the skin and turned to sweat. Kakeru quickly drained the noodles in a strainer and rinsed the batch under cold running water. He set down a bottle of Mintsuyu soup base, a bottle of mineral water, and a bowl of ice cubes on the table. "It's ready," he called out, wiping away sweat with the sleeve of his t-shirt. The twins heaved themselves up. Joda took one look at the table and whined. "Well, now that's just sad. Don't we have any garnish, or at the very least, or no scallions, or ginger?" Haiji was picking some shiso leaves from the garden right now. Kakeru put the mountain of noodles in the middle of the table, and then he started banging on the bottom of the empty pot with a ladle. Like frazzled, half-dead snakes, the other residents crept out of their respective corners of the house and assembled in the kitchen. I kind of like the idea that Haiji's used the pot clanging to wake everybody up for the runs, and now Kakeru is using the pot clanging to gather them all in the kitchen. I like it. It's great. "Is Haiji climbing up a mountain to pick them or something?" Yuki grunted. Shindo's missing too. I wonder what happened to him, Musa said. Still, I can't believe how brutal the landlord was. He didn't have to get that angry, Joji said. You had it coming, though, King countered. Somehow, they all managed to heave a deep sigh while slurping up their noodles. After Kiyose passed out, the landlord had tried to enter Chikuse-so to check on them, but Shindo and Musa desperately kept him back from crossing the threshold. The landlord grew suspicious. The next day, he sneaked into Chikuse-so while the residents were away at campus, and as soon as he stepped inside the front door, he discovered the gaping hole in the twins' floor right above his head. For the landlord, the time-worn apartment building was as precious as his own child, and his grief at seeing the damage was profound. He summoned the residents and announced, I need money for repairing Chikuse-so. I'm going to raise the rent to gather the funds. No! Don't know me! How about... We'll dazzle everyone in the Hakone Ekiden and pull in a big sponsor who will build us a new dorm. Do any of you whiners have the guts to say that? Well, there's no way we'd find a sponsor that generous. Joda, the real culprit behind the hole in the floor, started to mutter, but one glare from the landlord shut him up. Clearly, you all have too much pep for your own good, so Hakone should be an easy win, eh? If you don't want the rent to go up, make sure you get into Hakone. No excuses. With any more provocation, the elderly landlord might drop dead, so everyone obediently answered, yes, sir. So, based on the anime, I can assume that maybe in the novel, when they, go to Hakone and do well, that gets them a sponsor to help pay. Because if I'm remembering correctly, at the end of the anime, they were going to rebuild the dorms. They were going to tear down the old building and rebuild it. Interesting. All right. I can't just move out now, Prince murmured at the kitchen table, thinking of his treasured collection. We've got to keep the rent low. I don't want to go to practice more, but to be honest, isn't it suicidal to run in the summer? What do other track teams do? Most of the time, they go somewhere cool for training camp, like Hokkaido, Kakeru replied. Hokkaido? Joji breathed dreamily. The mouth-watering images of crabs, sea urchin row, and ramen waltzing through his mind were so obvious that everyone could almost see them reflected in his noodle soup. Kakeru cleared his throat, decided that it was best to pull Joji back into reality and keep the mental damage minimal. Ha! That's not an option for us. We don't have the money. Crestfallen, Joji gulped down the rest of his somen along with the half-melted ice. Just then, Kiyose and Shindo rushed into the kitchen. Where have you been, Haiji? We're done eating already, Nico said. Let's get out of the Tokyo Inferno. We're going to a training camp, Kiyose declared, thrusting a clump of shiso leaves on Nico. To Hokkaido? The twins leapt to their feet. No, Lake Shirakawa. Though not as exciting as Hokkaido, Lake Shirakawa was also a famous summer retreat in the highlands of Tatashina. But where would we get the money? Kakeru asked. Some people in the shopping arcade volunteered to help us, Kiyose explained. The owner of the batting cage, Okai, is letting us stay at their summer house by the lake. Yaokatsu and the others will cover our groceries during the camp, and we'll take the Otake van there and back, so it's not going to cost that much. Don't worry about our finances, Shindo assured them. I've been advertising our challenge to the folks at the shopping arcade and the university. I'm sure we'll gather more backers. Besides, Nico-senpai's wire dolls are selling even better than I expected. What? Nico gaped! He'd been shredding the shiso and sprinkling it into bowls that had still some somen left in them, but now he paused in midair. You've been selling them? Where? And who in their right mind would buy something like that? I asked a general store to stock them, and they're turning out to be popular with girls, like creepy, cute talisman dolls. Shindo smiled. I hope you'll keep them coming. Oh, I love it. I forgot they didn't ask Nico about this. Woohoo! Training camp! A training camp! Joda and Joji jumped up and down, grasping each other's hands. Prince had already disappeared from the kitchen. Apparently, he'd gone back to his room to start picking out which manga volumes to take to the camp. Each in his own way, they all indulged in daydreams about an exciting summer trip. A refreshing breeze rustling through the lakeside forest. A beautiful girl in a white summer dress sits across from me in a swan boat, while I bite into a grilled corn on the cob. Even when autumn comes, our love will go on. We'll promise to meet again in Tokyo, in a teary farewell in the silver birch grove. Joji's fantasy shattered when they arrived at Lake Shirakawa. Why does life have to be like this? He sulked. The summer house where they would be staying hadn't been used for a long time, and it was in a state of disrepair. They had traveled in the white van with Kiyose behind the wheel. After arriving at the house, which was nestled in a pine forest by the lake, they spent the rest of the day cleaning up the rooms. Once they had wiped the floors, scrubbed the bath, and swept the soot from the fireplace, they seemed to have breathed a bit of new life into the log cabin. I'm so excited to get to this episode in the anime because I always love Prince's rainbow trail of vomit behind him as they drive to the lake. At first glance, the cabin amid the clump of trees had looked more like a wild den built by a bear than a summer house. But their efforts had made it look passable as a human dwelling. Kakeru felt relieved as he piled some branches he'd forged into the fireplace. "Joji, your fantasies are too corny," Joda said, his face smeared with grime. "I knew there'd be a catch." As far as they could see during the day, the Shirakawa Lake Resort seemed to attract mostly families with kids and elderly couples. The flock of abandoned swan boats were laying in a gentle ripple by the water, accompanied by the tunes drifting from the small amusement park nearby. "It's nice that it's cool here, but it's actually chilly after sunset," Musa observed, pulling on a hoodie over his shirt. When Kakeru lit the firewood, the group gathered around the fireplace of their own accord. It was pitch black outside the windows, and only the rasping of the treetops could be heard. After gazing at the fire for some time, Kiyose said, "I've already prepared dinner. All that's left is popping in the roux. Let's go for a run before that." "Curry again? I don't want to. I'm too tired from cleaning. What if we get run over by a car in the dark?" Of course, Kiyose would have none of their protests. He herded them to their shoes and out onto the dirt trail winding through the forest. "We don't even know the paths that well yet," Nico scratched his head. "Well, which way's the lake?" "If we walk downhill, we'll get there eventually." Yuki led the way, and the rest jogged behind him in single file. I like that because isn't Yuki's part of the Hakone where he goes downhill? Isn't that part of it, if I remember right? Kiyose, bringing up the rear, gave them directions. 1 lap around the lake is 3.8 kilometers. Do 3 laps at your own pace and then come back to the cabin for dinner. Got it. When they got to the paved road by the lake, they started jogging at their usual speeds. The souvenir shops and the little museums along the road were already closed for the day. All the buildings were unlit except for a couple of large hotels. They couldn't see much of the scenery, so they felt their way along the unfamiliar route. Kakeru ran next to Kiyose, tracing the gentle curve of the dark road. Their only point of reference was the water lapping the shore. Kakeru had no qualms about running on an unfamiliar road in unfamiliar air. For him, getting a sense of distance was second nature. As long as he knew that 1 lap meant 3.8 kilometers, he could intuit roughly how far he had run based on his own speed and how his body felt. The pleasant thrill of running on unknown terrain coursed through him. "Where's our coach?" Kakeru asked Kiyose. "Is he at the Go parlor again?" "Who knows? He'll probably join us sooner or later." Kiyose cocked his head a little. "I don't know why, but he doesn't want to get in the car when I'm driving." I can't imagine why. When they had set off from Chikuse that morning, the landlord had seen them off from the yard. Though he looked on in satisfaction as the donated groceries were loaded onto the back of the van, he himself had refrained from climbing in. "You've gotten so much better at driving, though," Kakeru said, but regretted immediately, realizing it came off as a backhanded compliment. Regretting it, are you? Still, it was true that Kiyose's driving skills were improving at an incredibly rapid pace. On their first few drives to the Totai track meet, the group had felt as if they were strapped into a space shuttle doing aerobics. Tensing up or nearly passing out was the norm, while feeling safe enough to sleep in the van was unthinkable. But some of the passengers had actually dozed off on the road to Lake Shirakawa. "I'm a quick learner with anything," Kiyose said unperturbed. "I'm a perfectionist. I can't help going all out on research and practice." Kakeru remembered the myth that Nico had brought up on that first ride. Does that mean he's the same down there?" Kakeru had to wonder, but he didn't dare pose the question. He merely nodded and replied, "Sure, I can see that." "Oh my God! You went there. He went there." Kiyose's like, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist. I just go out on research and my practice. I just go all out when I practice something until I'm perfected at it." And Kakeru's the one that thought, "Oh, well, does that mean that you're just going to practice sex until you're great at it?" Oh my God. Kakeru and Kiyose passed the slow runners and were the first to return to the cabin. After 3 laps around the lake, they didn't mind the damp, chilly air of the highlands anymore. Of course, they're the first 2 back alone. They loosened up their muscles with a massage. And then Kakeru ran a bath while Kiyosei pressed a plastic bag full of ice against his right calf. This was to prevent inflammation of the strained muscle. "How's the leg?" Kakeru asked. "All good," Kiyosei smiled. "Go ahead, you can wash first." I'm living for this. Where was this in the anime? Kakeru had gotten out of the bath and swapped places with Kiyosei to stir the curry pot when the others came back from their jog. They tore off their sweaty t-shirts and swarmed the bathroom. Their fighting over the shower and off-pitch humming echoed all the way through the kitchen. Kiyosei seemed to have been pushed out of the bathroom. He reappeared in the kitchen, hair still wet, and popped open the lid of the rice cooker. Kakeru and Kiyosei worked together to set a large table made of solid timber. A massive pile of curry and rice, a salad, milk mixed with protein powder, and peaches for dessert. Everything had been provided by the stores in the shopping arcade. The others, refreshed by the bath, gathered around the table. Just as they picked up their spoons to start eating, Kiyosei said, "Wait a second, someone's missing." They all looked at one another. Musa and Shindo weren't there. "Well, that's odd. Even Prince is back already." "I don't think there was anyone behind or in front of me when I was doing my last lap," Prince said, puzzled. "Don't tell me they got lost in the forest." King stood up and peered out the dining room window. "Well, did anyone see them on their way back here?" Kiyosei asked. Oh, no one had. Nico went upstairs. They heard him switching on the lights on the second floor so that Musa and Shindo would have something to guide them back to the cabin through the woods. Where could they be? "Maybe we should go look for them," the twins suggested anxiously. "No, we can't have anyone else go missing. Let's wait for them a little longer." Even though he stopped the twins from going, Kiyosei was so worried that he couldn't sit still. He went to open the front door and stare out at the forest path that sunk into the darkness. He strained his ears for the rustle of footsteps, but nothing came. Though the curry was steadily cooling, the dinner was the least of their concerns. Kakeru stood beside Kiyosei, still on the threshold. Nico came back downstairs and gave Kiyosei's shoulder a pat. "No worries. Even if they have to sleep in the woods, it's not going to kill them. It's only one night." I love that Kakeru and Kiyosei have been having these moments together, and Kiyosei being so worried. Just then, the back door banged open. They spun around to find Musa and Shindo striding in from the side of the kitchen behind the dining space. The back of the kitchen was a steep slope, and there wasn't even a trail there. No one expected them to come in from that side. Musa and Shindo shouted at once, "Bad news! They're here too! The guys from Totai!" The group all pulled themselves together and sat around the table. Musa and Shindo told everyone what they'd seen over dinner. They had stumbled across Tokyo Taiku's clubhouse farther up the mountain. "It looked like a brand new building," Shindo said. "We saw the lights and thought that it was our place, so we walked up to it. And then we saw the Totai guys having dinner through the window." "By the way, grilled meat was on their menu," Musa added. "They appear to be having the highest quality Wagyu beef." King shoveled the ground pork curry into his mouth without a word. "Why did you climb up the mountain in the first place?" Kiyosei asked. "It wasn't on purpose. We just got lost in the dark," the pair said simply. "Shindo, I thought you were used to mountains." "I am, but I also have a horrible sense of direction." "Me too. It was so bad that back home my parents made me promise to never go to the savannah, even when friends invited me," Musa said. As Kiyosei rubbed his temples in consternation, Kakeru whispered to him, "What are you going to do? Weren't you planning to give Shindo the mountain climb leg at Hakone?" "Yeah," Kiyosei groaned. "We might just witness the first live broadcast of a stray runner in the history of Hakone Ekiden." "They do have those escort vehicles to guide the runners, so I doubt that," Yuki sneered. "But in the worst case scenario, we'd have to count on Shindo's animal sense of smell, sniff out a beast trail through the woods of Mount Hakone, and make a beeline for Lake Ashi." "Oh, is that actually a thing?" Joji asked eagerly when he caught on to the conversation. "Of course not. You're disqualified if you veer off the route," Kiyosei chided. "It used to happen back in the day." King jumped in to flaunt his knowledge of trivia. As a quiz maniac, he'd done some research on Hakone Ekiden. Back when they had 4 schools participating in the race, in the Taisho era, the story goes that every team put in the most effort on figuring out the best shortcut on the mountain. Even the Hakone Ekiden started out as your simple no-frills race. There was no radio broadcast or anything like that. "Isn't that cheating?" Prince asked as he peeled a peach. Nico chuckled as he helped himself to some more rice. Exactly the sort of thing college students would think up. Kakeru imagined those students in the 1920s running on wild animal trails, competing fiercely with their rivals, but also devising tricks to give themselves a little boost. Silly, playful students, not so different from today. I love that. I love that little nod to 100 years hasn't made that much difference in how young teenagers and youths in their early 20s think about such things. Also, Wagyu beef is actually, I know it's very popular in Japan, and I'm sure it's still pretty expensive in Japan, but it's really expensive when it's imported into the US. And Wagyu are not the breed of cattle that we raise in the US, so it's kind of considered exotic. And so it definitely is more expensive. But I also kind of like the idea that Taiko has this, like, or Totai has this, like, the upper crust fancy of the fancies, and our guys are like definitely the underdogs with like the most basic. Let's say we look for a shortcut once we break through the prelims, Yuki started. Like we said, that would be cheating. Anyway, our problem is Totai. What are we going to do about those guys? We'll definitely run into them on the road around the lake tomorrow, Shindo murmured. Kakeru was silent, but his fighting spirit flared up inside of him. He was determined to show the Totai team who was the better runner, even if they were only jogging. Don't get in a fight, Kiyose warned. There's only one lake here. We should give way to each other and run in peace. The Chikuseso team slept crowded together on the second floor, wrapped up in blankets. They woke with the bird song. After stretching, they went out for their pre-breakfast jog in the clean, fresh air. No sooner had they reached the lakeside road than they bumped into the Totai athletes. Dressed in matching tracksuits, the Tokyo Taiku track team had just finished their morning meeting in the empty parking lot of a souvenir shop before it opened for the day. About 50 people were getting ready for their jog. They lined up in neat ranks according to the level of their abilities. Their head coach, as well as several people who looked like assistant coaches, got into a few different cars that were apparently going to cruise alongside each group of runners. The first rank of runners, consisting of upperclassmen, began to jog. There was a clear order to everything they did. Joji didn't try to hide his admiration. That's impressive, he said. As for the Kansai track team, their long-distance runners consisted of just 10 residents of Chikuseso. They had never held a formal meeting before practice, and their coach was as absent as ever. Plus, their outfits were a motley collection. The twins were sporting brightly colored souvenir t-shirts from Hawaii. I kind of actually love this, though, because I'll be honest, I went to a college where this was back in, when I was in college, was like the late 2000s, like early aughts, and Harry Potter was really big, and so was Quidditch. So there were a lot of college campuses trying to bank off of that, so they would have Quidditch teams, where if you've ever watched Harry Potter, if not, it's kind of like they're witches and wizards on broomsticks playing a form of, not rugby, but like lacrosse, kind of, I guess is the best way to put it. It's hard to explain, but you ride on broomsticks. And so you could see like Harvard University had like matching maroon sweaters and like custom made broomsticks that they rode on throughout their quads on their campus. The school I went to had a Quidditch team. We had t-shirts made for our final tournament, but it was a ragtag group of college students. And these college students had anything from broomsticks to Swiffer mops to like one person had like just like an old mop, like a janitor would use. They were very ragtag, but it was very organic and they were fun. And they actually beat like one of the neighboring colleges. It was a pretty big deal. So I always think when I was watching the anime and seeing Chikuseso's ragtag group of the 10 runners, I always thought back to that Quidditch team at my college and was just like, yeah, but it's fun that way, right? Sakaki, the first year at Totai, seemed to have noticed them. He whispered something in a teammate's ear and it quickly caused a stir amongst the rest of the group, and many of them, especially the first years, kept glancing back at the Chikuseso team as they jogged in front of them. I don't know, this is making me self-conscious, Musa mumbled. King, who was easily unnerved, looked like he wanted to turn around and head back to the cabin. Let's go. Nothing could daunt Kakeru. When it comes to running, I'll never fall behind anyone. No one in the world can make me back down. I wonder because so far in the anime, up until this point, through the first 10 episodes, anytime Sakaki is around, Kakeru gets fired up and he gets close to like getting up in Sakaki's face. And Sakaki in the anime keeps saying, what, are you going to punch me again? And he keeps making references that Kakeru has been violent in the past. And in the novel, that's never really come up. Like Kakeru has never really had a moment, like he's been mouthy, but violence has never come up and his past has never come up either. So it'll be interesting to see what we do with this. Where do you get that energy this early in the morning? The others grumbled, but they started jogging too, as though dragged forward by Kakeru. Kyosei called out to them, "Leave Kakeru alone. Keep to your own pace." Kakeru let out a small laugh. Sure enough, going against his own instructions, Kyosei swiftly caught up with Kakeru. Sakaki was jogging ahead, beckoning to them behind his back. "Don't take the bait," Kyosei said. "I can easily overtake him. Stick to your own rhythm. We'll go easy. Hold a pace of 5 kilometers in 20 minutes this morning." Kakeru looked at Kyosei. Kyosei wore a serene expression on his face, looking straight ahead as he ran. He seemed to be concentrating on listening to the voice of his own body. For Kyosei, once he was in the zone, the pack of Totai students and the cars that occasionally passed by ceased to exist. He was completely absorbed in the motions of his own body as it made its way through the narrow space between the pine forest and the lake. "Got it," Kakeru replied. He pushed Sakaki out of his head. 5 kilometers in 20 minutes. He focused all his senses on how his muscles, heart, and lungs worked when he ran at that speed. It was a comfortable pace. It was slow enough he could feel the blood circulating through his body and brain. Birds sang in clear, liquid trills to the rapidly rising sun. The breeze that blew from the high above mountains made small ripples across the surface of the lake. I wonder what strength really is. Kakeru found himself going back to the question. Take Haiji's calmness, for example. He's running in his own world, unwavering in perfect self-command. I can run faster than him, but I'm not sure if I'm stronger. I'm too hot-headed and too obsessed with winning. Kakeru wanted to find out, to know what he was missing, to know what made someone strong. It was the first time he'd ever wanted something like that. Until now, he'd always run as if something were chasing him, driven forward by the compulsion of his own body. Oh my God, I love this. I love every part about this. This is so good. And I think I know what episode in the anime this is going to get to, but the imagery. There was nothing uniform about the Chikyuseiso team, but Kyosei led them with a strong and yet flexible command, without binding them up or forcing anything on them. Kakeru turned to look behind him. The group was running alongside the lakeside road. Their abilities still varied greatly, but they were all jogging with a single solid form and intense concentration. Though they had endlessly moaned over their practice back in the spring, after 3 months of hard work, they now resembled a proper track team. Kakeru turned to face forward and looked down a little. He stretched out his senses to feel the movements of his body, from the toes striking the ground to the arc drawn by the fingertips as arms sliced through the air. If I keep following Haiji, I'm sure I'll see something new. Something I've been looking for all this time, that shines bright in the dark. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will, Kakeru. I'm sure you will. Led by Sasaki, the Totai first years began to play tricks on the Kansai team to interfere with their practice. They spread out in a horizontal line across the road to block the way. They clustered around Kakeru to put pressure on him. Whenever the coaches or the upperclassmen weren't looking, they found different ways to taunt him. Kakeru didn't particularly mind. He'd grown used to such harassment during club activities and races in high school. If they surrounded him, all he had to do was speed up and shake them off. If they blocked the way, he merely had to pass them by sidestepping to the opposite lane. But most of the Chikyuseiso team weren't much more than beginners. They didn't know the wildly tactics involved in running a race. They were thoroughly intimidated by the first year's underhanded maneuvers and were thrown off their stride. At first, Kyosei had simply looked on, but he finally ran out of patience. They're acting immature, he muttered, when they finished their evening jog. He decided to take a stand. The group of first years, about 20 in total, were loitering in the parking lot of the souvenir shop. Kyosei boldly marched up to them. Kakeru and the others quickly followed suit. They had Kyosei's back. The clear, melancholy tones of the Higurashi cicada echoed in the twilight air. So we just gotta knock out 2 guys per person. That'll do it. Nico calculated, cracking his knuckles, and Musa flexed his ankles as they approached. The Todai students stopped talking and turned around. The teams faced off in the middle of the parking lot. We want you to stop interfering with our practice, Kyosei said quietly, breaking the silence. Sakake stepped up from the group. And we don't want to hear any false accusations. Do you even have any proof that we got in your way? We do, Yuki said, taking his cell phone out of his pocket and thrusting it in front of the Totai group. The screen showed an unmistakable photo of Kakeru looking cramped as he ran behind a row of Totai students who were taking up the entire sidewalk. I was snapping some photos to study his form later, and I just happened to catch something interesting. I know how you feel, but leave your phone at home next time, Kyosei warned Yuki. If you have anything extra in your pocket, that's going to skew your form. Is that the problem here? Kakeru wanted to say. Yuki's overzealous research method made him cringe, but the sneak shot didn't seem to disturb Kyosei, who clearly had only running in his mind. Scary. Sakaki looks flummoxed and awkward in equal parts. Kyosei turned back to the Totai group. That's all I have to say. I prefer not to have to show this blurry picture to your coach and captain. I hope you'll understand. Of course, crystal clear, Sakaki scoffed. We at Tokyo Taiku are working hard towards Hakone, and we take our practice seriously. We have no time to deal with amateurs who are just running for the hell of it. We think alike, Kyosei replied. Kakeru saw a blood vessel on Kyosei's temple throb. It really is a nuisance when some people stoop to infantile tricks to meddle with serious practice. Kyosei and Sakaki stood face to face, glaring furiously at each other. Kakeru whispered Haiji and gently put a hand on his arm to calm him down. Oh, okay, Kakeru calming Kyosei down. Okay, all right. We obviously have a different idea of what serious means, Sakaki taunted. Why don't we settle it with a race? 10 of you and 10 of us, first years, run around the lake and see who gets the better overall time. Kakeru boiled with rage at Sakaki's provocation. Bring it on, he roared. He knew Sakaki was working hard, but he couldn't just let him mock the Chikusei team like that. Seeing Sakaki's repulsive attitude was like seeing himself the way he was acting several weeks ago, and he couldn't stand it. This time, it was Kyosei who grabbed Kakeru's arm to hold him back. But Kakeru shook him off and kept going. You've got a problem with me, right? Then why don't the two of us duke it out? Don't rope them in just because you can't beat me. As always, you're so full of yourself, Kurihara. Sakaki shot back without flinching. They were rearing to pounce on each other, so their teammates stepped in on both sides. Nico grasped Kakeru's arm from behind in a full Nelson. Kakeru glowered at Sakaki, breathing heavily. Sakaki's teammates grabbed Sakaki's arms, but he was still kicking the air, trying to get at Kakeru. Is now really the time for fights? Kyosei said quietly, addressing both boys. Focus on training. Sakaki extracted himself from his teammate's hold and straightened out his tracksuit. He looked at Kakeru, Kyosei, and the other Chikusei members in turn. Having fun? Sakaki asked in a low voice. You finally met some friends to run with. Is that fun for you, Kurihara? That's enough, Kyosei interrupted, turning his back to Sakaki. Let's go back. Kyosei urged him, but Kakeru didn't move. Friend? Sakaki had no right to use that word like that. It enraged Kakeru and made his stomach churn. A sharp pang shot deep inside his skull. He tore himself away from Nico's hold and stood motionless, his glare fixed on Sakaki. Are you satisfied now? Sakaki went on. Running playground races with your nice friends who fuss over you? It's not like that. It was you and the rest of them that always made a fuss over my speed. Underneath the surface, though, the team back then had been consumed by a raging whirlpool of jealousy and rivalry. I despised that track team in high school. You'd all pretend to be friends, but you'd stab each other in the back the first chance you got. I hated you guys so much it made me want to puke. Kakeru wanted to let loose the scream inside his head, but he was too infuriated to put his feelings into words. And in the back of his mind, a small part of him admitted he deserved whatever Sakaki had to say about him. Sakaki can't forgive what I've done. Just live with it. Kakeru willed himself to swallow his rage, clenching his fists. It was my fault he couldn't run in the last big race in high school. So it's no wonder he's mad at me. Just pretend it's near a barking. Let him bark. So you can run along with your buddies, huh? Why couldn't you do the same that time? Why'd you make all your hard work come to nothing? All you had to do was just hold back a little bit. No, I can't near as cute, but Sakaki sure as hell isn't! Sakaki reproaches quickly made Kakeru scrap any leniency. I can't hold back. That's just the way I am. Kakeru sounded so vehement that even a lion might have turned tail and ran from him. He was the one who wanted to interrogate Sakaki. Why did you just stay quiet and put up with that suffocating club? Words came brimming up in his chest, but it always took time for Kakeru to voice them out loud. All too soon, his counterattacks were trampled down by Sakaki, who charged at him with the force of a stampeding elephant. "Don't flatter yourself, Kurihara," Sakaki growled in a low tone. "Knowing you probably expected the best colleges to single you out. I bet you thought they'd invite you over, even if you couldn't run in the race, didn't you? Well, too bad. In the end, you're just an egocentric, selfish piece of..." "I thought I said that's enough." Kyosei's glacial voice made them stop dead in what was starting to resemble a battle between two fierce beasts of the savannah. Kakeru collected himself and stole a glance at Kyosei, who was standing right behind him. Kyosei's face was as blank as a sheet of ice. Behind him, the twins were flapping their arms, trying to signal him to back down because Kyosei was about to explode. When he saw that Kakeru's fire had been extinguished, Kyosei turned his chilling look to Sakaki. "I understand there are things you want to say, but Kakeru is a member of Kansai's track team now. I'd appreciate it if you'd refrain from lashing out at him. I won't let you hurt or disturb him." Kyosei urged Kakeru to go home again, pulling on his shirt sleeve and pushing him towards the forest path. Kakeru started walking away with him. "What did Kakeru do to Sakaki anyway?" King whispered. "I don't know, but it looks like everyone's got a thing for him." Joda murmured back! They gave free rein to their imagination. Kyosei told them to hurry up so the rest of Chikusei members turned to leave the parking lot. "Be careful, he might betray you at the last second, too." Sakaki snarled at their backs. Kyosei threw him a smirk. "Well, at the prelim, we'll show you just how serious we are as a team of friends. Oh, but maybe you'll be too busy scurrying around doing errands to watch the race. Well, best of luck on getting picked as a regular." "Who's the immature one now?" "He's got a twisted personality, that Haiji," Nico and Yuki muttered with a shiver. In the Kansai team, they never had to worry about internal struggles over getting promoted or being a regular member. There was no such thing. "I suppose there are benefits to being a small underdog team," Musa said, pitying the sour-faced Todai first years. Kakeru stole a sideways glance at Kyosei. The vein on his temple wasn't bulging anymore, but he still looked grim, apparently lost in thought. "I've stirred up trouble again." Kakeru tried his best to gulp down the heavy sigh that threatened to escape him. "I'm sorry, Haiji. There's no need for you to apologize." Maybe he's still angry. Kakeru faltered and settled on a different phrase. "Thank you, Haiji. You're welcome." That seemed to soften the curve of Kyosei's cheek. For the first time, Kakeru realized it was better to thank someone in a situation like this. He stood up for me, after all. The thought washed away his rage and frustration. Feeling lighter, he broke out into a run. "Draw a bath for us," Kyosei called after him. Kakeru raised a hand in response. The wind of the highlands carrying the night chill whipped past Kakeru, but the warmth never left his body. Shut up! Shut up! Oh my god! So Kyosei just Kyosei sticking up for Kakeru, and oh my god, him sticking up for him, and Kakeru and him having this like little moment, and him telling Sakaki off. Also, I kind of like that in the anime, the focus was all on the coach that was the problem. And it kind of, I'm not saying it steered blame away from Kakeru, but it did kind of make the coach seem like the main problem. Here, they're not really even mentioning the coach, but Kakeru is the issue, and Sakaki is the one with the problem with him. And so I do like the fact that it gets into sort of like the team that Kakeru was on in high school were all kind of bitches. And Kakeru hated it. And now he's with a group of people that are actually decent. And, oh, it's so good. It's great. Anyway, at dinner, Kyosei announced a change in their training routine. He had come to the decision that it was unwise to let the Totai group irritate them any further. He proposed different times for their morning and evening jogs, and that they were also to avoid the road along the lake as much as possible for their main practice. No one opposed these changes. Totai's provocation had made them even more fired up than before. If they could dive into training without interference, they didn't care where they had to go. But seriously, this is killing me, Prince wheezed. The Chikusei-so team was running up a wild, pathless slope. It was a route that Shindo had discovered. This feels more like crawling than running, Prince went on. Tree roots are sticking out everywhere too. What if we sprain our ankles? Anyone who twists their ankles on this kind of easy terrain just doesn't have good reflexes, and their ankles are too stiff. They're not cut for running, Kyosei said matter-of-factly, and gave Prince a push from behind. Come on, we're almost there. Put your back into it and speed up a little. Kakeru and Shindo were already so far ahead that Prince couldn't see them anymore. Even though the hill was so steep it could have been challenging up just to walk up it, Kakeru and Shindo had swiftly scaled the slope with a powerful spring in their legs, as well as stamina and agility. Don't lump me together with some ninjas, Prince grumbled, wiping his sweat. Running up an incline every day would put too much burden on their knees, so Kyosei had devised a regimen that combined running up the mountain and running on a wide, flat course for optimum effect. With the latter, the focus was on running longer distances. There was a hiking trail at a high altitude about 2 peaks away from Lake Shirakawa. It was a path near the summit where hikers could walk while enjoying the view. Though fairly even, it was unpaved and covered only with wood chips, which meant less strain on the knees. Kyosei called it highland training. He came up with the idea to do cross-country running there. On the days when they weren't running up the side of the mountain, they all piled into the van and drove to the hiking trail. The trail was slightly more than 3 kilometers per lap, so they did 6 laps to make 20 kilometers in total. When they were running, just a small increase in the altitude was enough to make them feel uncomfortably aware of oxygen thinning out. At first, King detested the highland training, dubbing it a tour through hell. Prince would be in such a state by the end of the 20-kilometer run that an elderly couple on a hike could overtake him. But their bodies gradually adapted to the terrain, and it was evident that they were steadily gaining strength. Thanks to the regular routine and meals, Nico had succeeded in getting more fit. Since he managed to shave off the extra fat, his body was lighter and his time improved. Oh, that's nice! Yuki, who liked to delve into theory, bombarded Kyosei with questions about the training. Once he was satisfied, he threw himself into the practice without a single complaint. His success with the bar exam was proof enough that he had an aptitude for steady, repetitive work. With their sunny temperament, the twins didn't see hardship as hardship. Shindo could bask in the thrill of running in the mountains, where he felt completely at home. Even Kakeru was impressed by the power in his legs and the tenacity that propelled him up the steep gradient. In contrast, running up a hill wasn't Musa's forte, but as soon as he switched to the flat trail, his supple muscles revealed their full potential. With long strides, he kicked the ground as if he weighed nothing. Even Prince, whose running capacity had been the biggest concern for the team, was improving his distances little by little. Now he could run up to 10 kilometers without whining at all. It was remarkable progress. Kyosei's insight and forethought played a part into this. He had confiscated a manga that Prince had brought with him and made it a rule that he would be allowed to read them only on the nights when he completed the full training. Prince always said that he'd suffocate without manga. He worked himself to the ground just to have those moments of happiness at night. His brave efforts could have moved anyone to tears. Of course, Kakeru and Kyosei were making steady progress, shaping their bodies into vessels for running. I love this. This actually kind of explains, too, how when they get to the prelims doing all this mountain training, like getting used to running in that sort of air would get them ready to run when they would do the prelims and put them at a better advantage. So that's exciting. So good for them. Because Kakeru was running more than the rest of the team, he often struggled to fall asleep due to his chronic sore muscles. But when he thought of the pain and throbbing heat as a sign that new tissues were forming within his muscles, he was ready to endure anything. He even felt something that verged on pleasure. Hello. Hello, Kakeru. What? Each morning when he set off running again, his progress was tangible. He could clearly feel himself leaping into the world of speed, deeper and higher than the day before. The Chikusei-so members were now running longer distances than ever with more perseverance. They were riding a good wave. As the fruits of their labor became palpable, this recognition fueled their motivation even more. While conquering new distances and times that used to be unbearably painful to run, they gradually discovered the thrill of moving their bodies. They became more and more engrossed in running. As for the jogs that they went on dawn and after sunset to avoid clashing with the Totai crowd, everyone could handle the load with ease. The jogs were at a lower altitude than the hiking trail and set at a more moderate pace and distance than the main practice, so this routine was turning out to be a casual breather. One evening, about halfway through the summer camp, a thunderstorm struck in the middle of the jog. Come wind or rain, long-distance races continued. Kakeru thought it would be good practice, so he ignored the bad weather and kept running around the lake. The lower temperature and higher humidity suited running, and it made it easier to breathe. But the thunder and rain grew increasingly violent. A flash of lightning cleaved the night sky near the horizon. Huge drops of rain pelted him relentlessly, and his skin began to hurt. He couldn't hear anything except the rain pouring down like a waterfall. The water splashing against the pavement shrouded the road in a white mist. Weather was fickle in the mountains, but Kakeru had never seen such a torrential downpour. Within a matter of seconds, Kakeru looked like he'd gone swimming with clothes on. It was difficult to see ahead in the dark. Finally, Kyosei gave up on the jog and instructed everyone behind him to return to the cabin. Don't catch a cold. Head straight for the bath when you get back. Kakeru stood near Kyosei and made sure that the others were turning around in the forest path. He could barely make out their shapes through the veil of cascading water. When he counted up to 6, he realized something was wrong. The last one to pass him just now was Prince, who should have been at the rear end of the group. 2 were missing. There was no sign of Joda and Joji. Haiji, the twins are missing, Kakeru yelled. Where are they? Kyosei had to shout over the roar of the rain. Maybe they're waiting out in the rain somewhere. I'll go look for them. Go ahead with Alice. We'll catch up. Kakeru retraced the road in search of the twins. When he ran, the raindrops struck his face even harder, and he felt like he was drowning. He ran on for a while without seeing any sign of the twins. Did I miss them in the rain? He came to a halt, and there was a burst of light overhead, and a deep rumble erupted almost at the same time, making him flinch. He noticed a faint orange light out of the corner of his eye. It came from a public restroom in the parking lot on the shore of the lake. Maybe they took cover there. Kakeru left the road and entered the concrete structure with a triangular roof. The bathroom appeared to be empty. With the lights on and the sound of rain slightly muffled, the narrow space felt inorganic and unreal, like a nuclear bomb shelter. Kakeru wiped his face with his hands and called out to the closed cubicles just in case. Joda, Joji, are you there? Yep, in here. The twins answered in chorus from 2 adjacent cubicles. Kakeru was relieved. Turns out they hadn't been struck by lightning, and their charred remains weren't lying on the side of the road. What happened to you guys? He asked. For a while, the sound of rain continued until the twins opened their doors and stepped out at the same time. Looks like our bellies got upset, Joda said. I started hurting like crazy all of a sudden. I don't know what we would have done in this bathroom if it wasn't here, right, bro? Totally. Pouring from the sky, pouring from our bowels. They both looked pale as they rubbed their stomachs. Too much milk, Kakeru concluded. Ever since they'd arrived at Shirakawa Lake, the twins had been guzzling down at least 2 liters of milk per day. Oh my God, my brother drinks like half a gallon every couple days, but still. The fact the milk was a free gift from the shopping arcade had made them greedy. Drenched from the rain, all 3 of them were starting to get cold. They had to get going soon. Jogging is canceled. Do you think you can make it back to the cabin? I'm not sure about that, Joji whimpered. I'll squeeze my butt tight and get by somehow, Jonas said with a grim resolve. They left the bathroom and started jogging in the rain. They'd gone about 500 meters when Jonas stopped short. I'm screwed. Joji looked pasty too. Hey, Kakeru, do you think we'd better go back to the bathroom or press on to the cabin? Huh? Kakeru looked back at them at a loss. The poor twins were hunched over like a stiff pair of shrimp. Well, not much choice. Just do it behind one of those bushes. No way. What would we wipe with? Well, don't worry. Nobody's around. Just use some leaves or something. You'll live. You wouldn't be so blasé if you were the one. I'll get you for this. Despite their grumbling, Joji and Joda were clearly in a critical situation. They clambered through the thicket up a gentle slope on the side of the road. They took a similar measure twice more on the way back, and by the time they reached the forest trail leading back to the cabin, the twins had let themselves go completely. I might as well streak now. Me too. If we have to stop and get it out every so often, we should go pantless. Don't even try, Kakeru laughed. They cracked each other up with silly jokes as they ran towards the light of the cabin. The slight awkwardness that had lodged them in ever since their fight in the twins' room was washed clean by the heavy rain. I forgot about that. They were all exhausted from the twins' diarrhea, Kakeru from worry, and it made them hyper in a weird way. I can imagine why the anime didn't do this. But this is amazing. I love this so much. We're back. The moment they burst into the cabin, the twins flung off their shirts and shorts and made a run for the bath. Kakeru pulled off his drenched shirt, too. A high-pitched scream pierced the air. Startled, the naked twins and Kakeru, who were just about to pull down his pants, stopped in their tracks. Oh no! In the dining room stood the landlord and a slender girl with long black hair! The girl from Yaokatsu! Oh no! Why did we not get this in the anime? Why was this not in the anime? Oh my god. Also, I know that feeling like whenever you're so delirious and like just hyper from just everything crazy going on and you get in that state of delusion, you're just laughing and goofing off. Oh my god. What do you think you're doing? Kiyose hurtled out of the kitchen and steered the twins to the bathroom. The rest of the team sitting around the TV were cracking up. The Yaokatsu girl was covering her face with her hands, but Kakeru didn't miss it. Her gleaming eyes were definitely peeking between her fingers. I'm Hanako Katsuda, she introduced herself later. The twins, now out of the bath and properly dressed, grinned from ear to ear, echoing her name. Hana, huh? What's so nice about Hana? Kakeru wondered. Hana sounded like a flower, but turn it around, you get the kanji for Napa. So she's basically a leafy vegetable. But there was no denying it. Hanako was beautiful. Her clear doe eyes kept darting to the twins, and she blushed every time she looked at them. Okay, Kakeru being like, well, she's pretty, but what about it? Oh my god, what about it? Hanako was also a first year in the Faculty of Letters at Kansai. You guys were kind of the talk of the school even before summer, you know, she told them. The dining table was overflowing with numerous dishes made by Kiyose and Hanako. Feeling refreshed after his bath, Kakeru sat down with an itadakimasu and reached for the stewed and simmered vegetables with chopsticks. The vegetables were chopped unevenly, and the flavoring was rather strong. Hanako was probably not so used to cooking, but of course no one complained. After all, she had come all the way with the landlord in Yaokatsu's mini pickup truck, which was loaded to the brim with food from the shopping arcade. We brought you some meat, too. We can have yakiniku tomorrow, she announced. Is it beef? Are we having grilled beef? The twins were quick to react. Yeah, she nodded, her cheeks flushing again. Whoop, finally, we're getting beef, too! Between their ravenous appetites and their sense of rivalry with Totai, Joda and Joji were pumped. Kakeru didn't get it. The twins had been so eager to get a girlfriend, but somehow they didn't notice an opportunity when it hit them right in the face. Seated next to Kakeru, Kiyose was making his disapproval known. Oh, yeah, like Kakeru's getting onto the twins for not noticing Hana right in front of them, and then Kiyose comes and sits right beside him. Oh, I see what you're doing, Sho. I see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. What were you thinking, Coach? You seriously brought a girl to stay with 10 rowdy young men? You mean 11, the crafty landlord replied, adding himself to the count. Well, if you ask me, I'd say it's more like the twins, who you have to watch out for, Yuki observed. The twins, having forgotten all about their stomach aches, were gamboling around the room, expressing their delights at the prospect of yakiniku. Hanako was all smiles as she watched them. But Kakeru felt gloomy for some reason. What's wrong with me, he wondered. Nira lay on the mat by the back door, thumping his tail. He had come along, too, riding in the back of the truck, and seemed happy to see the Chikuseiso residence after so long. The next day was perfectly sunny. Kakeru took a deep, long breath. The sweet scent of grass mingled with the clear, crisp air. White clouds dropped their shadows on the green face of the mountains, drifting towards the east. The landlord and Hanako followed them to the hiking trail in Yaokatsu's mini truck. The whole team got more motivated than ever after learning that Hanako would be staying with them for a while. At night, the men were packed like sardines on the second floor of the cabin. There was even less room for them now because they'd hung a sheet across a string on one side to make a private space for Hanako. Even in the cool night of the highlands, it was hard to fall asleep when they were all crammed together. But every single one of them welcomed her wholeheartedly. Though they'd known her for just a short time, they could already tell just how much she was genuinely rooting for them. And she'd brought the support of the entire shopping arcade community with her. It's a miracle, isn't it? She's pretty inside and out, Shindo murmured. Yes, Hanako is very pretty, Musa agreed. But what I don't get is why she has a favorable impression of Joda and Joji. Shindo tilted his head, puzzled. Musa also tilted his head, flavorful. Not flavorful, favorable, Shindo picked up a twig and scratched the word on the ground. Nico, doing his pre-practice stretches, commented, she might just have bad taste. Oh! Kakeru smiled wryly. Even as they spoke, the twins were telling Hanako about their high-altitude runs, and she was listening intently, with crush written all over her face. So, which one of the twins does she like? Yuki asked Kakeru, gazing at the scene. I don't know. Ask her. Why me? You're in the same year. What kind of reason is that? But Kakeru couldn't say no to a senior. He merely gave a non-committal nod and walked off towards Kiyose to check on the details for the day's practice. Like, go find Kiyose. Like, no, we're not going to deal with this right now. Kiyose was filling in the landlord about the training schedule. We'll be doing 8 laps around the course today, about 25 kilometers in total. Kakeru and I will do the first lap in 12 minutes, and then increasing our pace, aiming for the 10-minute lap at the end. I'll give everyone specific instructions on their pace according to their levels. Even Prince, who's the slowest, will be starting the run at 16 minutes for the first lap. How does that sound? Fine. I'm giving you free rein, Haiji. Do as you like. The landlord's attention had wandered somewhere else entirely. He was too busy gazing at Hanako in the distance. Is he really supposed to be our coach? Kakeru whispered to Kiyose. Yeah, well, never mind. Kiyose laughed. That's just the way he is. We can count on him when push comes to shove. Really? After a pause, Kiyose said, probably. Then he took off his tracksuit jacket. Let's get started. I like that Kiyose and Kakeru are the only 2 men there that are not concerned about Hanako in any way, shape, or form. I wonder why. Okay. As the sun rose higher in the sky, its rays burned more fiercely. The wind was refreshing, but it was scorching near the peak, where there was hardly any shade. Hanako stood by the midway through the course, handing out her homemade lemon water blended with protein powder. Without stopping, Kakeru grabbed a bottle and took a gulp through the straw. He almost gagged on the grainy, sour liquid. Sure, protein and lemon are good for the body, but who'd even think of mixing them together? The powder separated from the liquid, and it felt like the granules might stick to the wall of his stomach. Isn't this insanely disgusting? He murmured. Agreed. Kiyose's face also looked like he'd just seen the corpse of a cat run over by a car. But you better drink up. Otherwise, we might get dehydrated in this heat. Again, I like just the subtle symbolism of Kiyose and Kakeru are not getting whatever Hana is dishing out. I'm just saying... They literally just did that to us. I'm just saying. Also, if you've ever taken the little packets of powder and mixed them up for a drink and you didn't get it done all the way and there's little globules, gross. Totally hear what they're saying. Yep. They tossed their empty bottles on the side of the trail. They would retrieve them later for reuse. The pair were coming up to the members who were 1 lap behind them. Everyone was sagging. Kiyose called them out as he passed by. Your pace is dropping, but don't check your watches too much. Try to get the feel of it with your own body as much as possible. Keep your orders short and sweet, okay? It's too hot for this. Amid the shower of boos from the others, Kakeru and Kiyose maintained their set pace and completed 25 kilometers exactly as planned. Even they were exhausted, breathing hard. They did an easy jog to cool down and then loosened their muscles with stretches. They pulled off their shirts, which were drenched in sweat, and wiped themselves with the towels they'd brought in their backpacks. Once they changed into fresh shirts, they sat down in the shade of a tree. The others, who were still doing their laps, ran past them, one after the other, panting hard. If it gets to be too much, don't push yourself, Kiyose shouted. Though no one's going to listen, are they? Not one of them stopped running. They were all intent on crushing their training goal. They were nothing like their former selves back in early spring. Where were these moments? Where was Kiyose and Kakeru sitting under a tree together while everybody ran? Where... Hanako walked over to them and sat down next to Kakeru. Kakeru worried that he smelled sweaty and scooted over a little to Kiyose's side. A small chuckle escaped Kiyose. Oh my god, y'all. How many kilometers did you guys run in a day? Hanako asked. Well, it depends on our condition and quota, but I guess around 40. What? She exclaimed. Kakeru jumped in surprise and Kiyose stifled another chuckle. What is it? What is it? Kakeru glared at Kiyose. Oh, don't mind me. Kiyose, still smirking, feigned indifference and looked up at the sky. That's impressive. Hanako murmured in awe, then let out a small sigh. I never knew you had to practice that much. I thought people who were good at endurance runs could just go and run marathons like it was no big deal. It's Ekiden, not a marathon, Kakeru corrected her. Oh, right, Ekiden. Yeah. His face felt kind of hot. He could feel Kyosei shaking a little on his right, but he couldn't see his face. Shit, he's definitely laughing at me, Kakeru thought. The twins ran past them. One more lap, Kyosei called out. Hanako followed the twins with her eyes. Kakeru remembered that Yuki had given him a mission. You like the twins, right? Oh gosh, how'd you know? It's not hard to not notice, Kakeru retorted in his head. He sensed that the same thought had crossed Kyosei's mind at the same time. So, which one do you like? What do you mean, which? Well, you know, Joda or Joji, which one? Both of them, duh! Hanako blushed and slapped Kakeru's shoulder in embarrassment. His first thought was that she was kind of offbeat, and then his brain registered what she had just said. Oh, huh? Kakeru's voice flipped. What do you mean both? How is that okay? Why not? They look the same. Totally my type. You've got to be kidding. Anger welled up in him, and he sprang up. Well, if they're not some onions going for 150 yen a pair, how can you like both at once? Just because you're into their looks? That's a bit heartless, isn't it? Not a bad metaphor by your standards, Kyosei said to himself. Hanako looked up at Kakeru with round, quizzical eyes. Well, how come? Well, first off, the twins are two different people. Shouldn't you look at more at, their personalities and stuff? Are personalities that important? Obviously! I'm not so sure. As far as I'm concerned, once I fall for someone, I really don't care about their personality. Hanako smiled happily. I've gotten to know them a little better since last night. They don't have any weird quirks that creep me out, and their faces are pure perfection. Isn't that enough? I couldn't pick either one of them even if you told me to. Kakeru felt drained and slumped back down against the tree. Kyosei was hiccuping now, probably from suppressing his laughter too much. Hanako has a point, Kyosei said between hiccups. Sometimes you can't help falling for someone no matter how mean they are or how much they make you suffer. Exactly, Hanako nodded eagerly, pleased to have someone on her side. That's just love, right? The Chikuseiso members had finished their 25 kilometers and were coming back. I'll go get the landlord. He said he'd take Nira on a walk and went off to the other side of the trail, Hanako said, leaving the shade. Kakeru and Kyosei were silent for a while, watching the grass waving in the wind. Have you ever experienced something like that? Kakeru asked. Kyosei's hiccups had finally stopped. You haven't? He turned the question around, a hint of a laugh in his voice. After a few beats, Kakeru said, No, I haven't. Are you sure? What about running? No matter how painful it is or how much it makes you suffer, you keep at it. Isn't that the same kind of feeling as what she was talking about? Kyosei rose and walked out into the sun to the others who were sprawled out on the ground. Come on, get up, he said, dragging them to their feet. Don't skip the cool down. If Haiji is right, Kakeru thought. If my feelings for running are like being in love, love is such a futile thing. Once you're spellbound, there's no escape. You're drawn to the object of your love, whether you like it or not, and it makes no difference whether there's any hope of a reward. Without any idea of where you're headed, you're pulled in like stars getting swallowed up by a deep, dark night. Kakeru could never let go of running, no matter how painful it was, no matter how much he suffered, and even if there was nothing left to gain. He stepped out of the shade to hand out more bottles of the protein lemon water. The rays of the sun hit him straight on the head. Cicadas broke into a seething hiss all at once. The clouds were long gone, blown away by the wind. The sky is so blue, he said to himself. It was the height of summer. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Anime. I mean, I'm glad you focused on the other members as well. I'm glad you did. That's great. But these Kakeru and Haiji moments of them slowly slowly becoming more comfortable around one another, slowly connecting. Like this is the moment at the end of the anime where Haiji and Kakeru are like, this is what love is to me. Running is love, and you are running, so you are love to me. It's like, this is setting all of that up. Oh my God. This is setting every bit of that up. And it's so wild and beautiful. Yep. It's so good. It's so good. It's amazing. And yes, so we're in the heart of the summer camp. And all that. We have the confrontation in the anime, but I feel like there's so much focus on Haiji and Haiji and the others giving Kakeru his intervention. And I really did like the intervention during the anime, but I feel like the anime makes Kakeru out to be a lot more aggressive, and so the intervention feels more needed by the time they get into the summer camp. And here, they haven't even talked really about what Kakeru's deal is. But Kakeru, I can't believe that Hana in the anime is such like a little simple innocent soul, and she's like, what? Who? Me? Like the twins? What? I guess maybe. This Hana is like, yeah, I like them. I'm like 16. No, they're first year. She's like, I'm 18. She's like, they're looking good and they are fun. I'm not really into this whole like soulmates. Kakeru is way more romantic in this book than I've given him credit for, because he's like, well, but what about their personalities? And don't you like them for who they are on the inside? And she's like, dude, I'm 18 and these boys are just some fun. Let me have some fun. And Kakeru's like, no. But the fact that Kyosei gives him such a hard time, I'm sure that some people might take it as, at first what I was afraid of was that the book was going to try to make it to where Kyosei's like trying to nudge Kakeru into like having a crush on Hana, because that seems like something a lot of series would do. But no, Kyosei's kind of just laughing at him like being tortured and just being like, you're cute. Like, that's literally what it's like. And it's, yes. And sometimes you can't help falling in love with someone no matter how mean they are or how much they make you suffer. And that I like that instead of it being a person that each of them were in love with, it's the idea of running that makes them suffer and is cruel to them, and they keep on going after it. And I feel like Haiji and Kakeru are both very running sexual with one another, and it's so good. It's so good. And the moment, I wish it was animated. The moment where the twins had the diarrhea in the bathroom and then they ran out in the rain with Kakeru and had this amazing moment. And it was just this beautiful building moment between the two of them. And then they stumble into the house and there's Hana with the landlord. It's so weird with the landlord being there. And it's so weird with her being there, but it kind of feels appropriate. And I like that the coach has like some input into what's going on, which is great. But y'all, this is amazing. I love this. So I might watch a few more episodes. I don't want to get too far into the summer camp because we're not through the summer camp yet. We're still at the summer camp as this is going on. But oh my God. Or maybe we aren't. Maybe it's the end of summer camp. I don't know. But next chapter is called The Soul Screams, which I don't remember what part that is, so I don't know if we're through the summer camp. I wanted the novel to deal with the episode part where I feel like maybe in the anime, they do the moment in the house where Kakeru and Haiji are out on the balcony and Hana is there, I think. That's correct. I think she does show up in the anime. So maybe it's been a while. But then Haiji does the whole "Isn't the moon lovely tonight," which is like the hint of all of this. But oh my God. I guess maybe that was the anime's adaptation of this moment. But also 40 kilometers is insane. 40 kilometers in a day is wild to me. They definitely do so much more running in the book that makes it definitely feel like much harder training to get ready for the prelims. Like, that's insane. Y'all. I'm floored. This is amazing, and I love it so much. So, anyway, I really want to know your thoughts down below, what you all think of this. but I'm so excited. I can't wait to dive into part 6 next week, but we're just going to have to wait and get to it. So we're halfway through the book, y'all. What do you think? So, anyway, I hope y'all are excited. I am too, but we're going to come back next week with part 6. I hope y'all have a great week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll see you all with Run with the Wind, the novel reactions very soon. Bye.